Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Domaine Carneros tasting today. Thank you all for participating. First, I'd like to say that I love Puerto Rico, and this is the first year in so many that I haven't been to visit the island. So I miss you all so much and can't wait to go back. So for those of you I might have met already, I used to work at Lady Family Wines, which is Cliff Lady and Fell Wines in Anderson Valley. And you guys are probably familiar with some of those wines, but I had this incredible opportunity this summer come up to be the CEO here at Domaine Carneros, and it's been such an incredible opportunity and time. And so I'm looking so forward to sharing with you a little bit about Domaine Carneros. And if you guys have any input, I think it's funny, I'm talking to a screen of myself. So please feel free to send any notes. Let me know if I've met you before over the years and if you've had the wines and some of your favorite pairings. So at any point, please pop onto the chat and share your thoughts with me as well. So what I love about Domaine Carneros is, well, obviously the wine, and we should start drinking some. So I'll be drinking along with you and tasting along with you. And we're going to start with the Domaine Carneros Brut 2016, which I'll talk about more in depth. But since that's why we're here, let's have a little toast. So cheers, everyone. So I love Carneros, for those of you who have been to Napa Valley. And I know that Puerto Ricans come to Napa Valley because I have met many of you here. In fact, I have a group, Moises from Vintus is sending some friends over tomorrow. So I'll be meeting some great people from Puerto Rico tomorrow, actually. What I love about Domaine Carneros is the Carneros region. So that's one thing. Carneros is in the southern half of both Napa and Sonoma counties. It's the only appellation that spans both Napa and Sonoma counties, making it very unique. It's in the southern end, and it has more similarities to each other, the southern end of Sonoma County and the southern end of Napa County, to each other than it does to the respective northern parts of Napa and Sonoma counties. We have more marine influence. We're very close to the San Francisco and San Pablo bays. We're breezier, for those of you who have sat out on the Domaine Carneros patio. Give a shout out if you've been here before. I'd love to see you in the chat room. You know that it's breezy in the afternoon especially. And this marine influence and these cool climates is what makes this area so amazing for producing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir for sparkling wine. And Claude Tattinger visited the Carneros wine region in the 40s and fell in love. And it reminded him of the Champagne region, and that was what sparked his initial dream of creating a sparkling wine house here in California using the traditional Champagne methods of production. And it wasn't until many years later, in 1987, when he had the opportunity to purchase a property here. So the Tattingers were longtime friends and business partners with a business organization and family called the Kopp family from Co-Brand. Co-Brand long imported Tattinger into the United States, and the two of them, those two families, the Kopp family and the Tattinger family, created this partnership. And in 1987, they founded Domaine Carneros. And so they purchased this amazing estate right at the gateway to Napa Valley. And they built this amazing landmark chateau. I have a little presentation to show you guys some slides here. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And many of you probably are, oh, I've got some friends. Hi, everyone. Still figuring out how to do all this technology here, like all of us. So many of you may have seen this chateau or visited us. Please give a shout out. I saw Arvine says hello. I'm not sure if you guys have visited here before, but you cannot miss this gorgeous chateau when you're driving through the southern end of Napa Valley. And this chateau was inspired by the chateau of the Tattinger family. So this chateau, the Marqueterie, I'll show you. That's the original chateau that's in France that the Tattinger family uses to this day to host private events and special events. And one of the things we're really known for is our gate at the entrance of our property. So there you can see our famous gate. We do make a Pinot Noir called the Famous Gate. And that's named after the fact that we are the entrance to Napa Valley. We are on the gateway to Napa Valley. And shortly after creating that wine, Pierre Emmanuel, the nephew of Claude Tattinger, saw this gate in an auction and shipped it to us. And so this is all the like Instagram rage these days when people come by our property. Obviously, our beautiful landmark chateau, and made in honor of the Chateau de la Marqueterie in Champagne, France. And another thing, so I mentioned the region a little bit. We are cool climate, we're windy, we have the coastal marine influence. Domaine Carneros has a really strong commitment to estate vineyards. So we have 6 different estate properties. The one where the beautiful chateau is located, we purchased in 1987. It had already been planted to Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. In fact, the grape growing history on the property dates back to the 1880s. And made it all the way through Prohibition. Around that time, it went out of grapes and into sheep grazing, which is what gives Carneros the name. Oh, Karina came in 2015, yay. So we have Carneros means sheep. This area had a big sheep grazing population back in the day. Now pretty much all you see is row after row of beautiful grapevines. So over time, we've expanded our estate holdings, and I think it's actually one of the things that makes us the most very unique is that we're one of the only of the grand sparkling houses in California that is 100% grown in Carneros, which is the region for sparkling wine. All of the other producers source from here, and that we are all estate produced, meaning we have our own vineyards to produce from, and we don't buy any grapes. And I think that that's something that's really important because it helps us control our quality and our messaging. So we have 6 beautiful estates, and they're all really close to the winery. They're all farmed by a gentleman who leads the team named Alberto Zamora. And Alberto is very involved with the Napa Valley grape growers and the Farm Worker Foundation here. So he's been a leader and a mentor to so many people in this industry, and helped so many young people in their careers in the grape growing and viticultural industry. So because we have the French heritage, a lot of our names of our vineyards are named after French, like Pompadour, and we'll talk about that when we taste the rosé. The La Rocaille, which basically means rock garden, for all the gravelly alluvial soils. So we didn't really talk about the soils, we talked about the climate, but the soils are a combination of clay and then alluvial rocks and gravel. So alluvial means from the riverbed. So back, hundreds of thousands of years ago, Carneros was underwater. And when that water has retreated, we've got these soils that are rich in clay and also have good drainage, though, because of the rock content in the soils. And that's what makes it such a great site for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and what Claude Tattinger saw in the 40s when he visited here. And then the beautiful sky. For those of you who might recognize this used to be the Microsoft background. If you remember the old Microsoft screensaver, this was taken in our vineyard along the highway, the Highway 121 between Napa and Sonoma. Our recent vineyard, Tula Vista and Entre Amis, these are newer vineyards that we purchased that have allowed us to bring all of our production into estate farming. So here's the Carneros region. For those of you who have been here, oh, we've got more. Sylvia came here too in 2012. So this is so awesome to see people who have been to visit. And I love that because I know it's not close, but I still love going to Puerto Rico every year. And I'm so glad that you guys come visit here too. So here you can see Domaine Carneros. It's right along the highway in between Napa and Sonoma. We've got the Las Amigas vineyard. We call that because that's the name of the road, but it's Entre Amis. The Rock Garden, La Rocaille, Tula Vista, Le Ciel Serein, the Serene Sky, and Pompadour Vineyard. So how's the Brut tasting? Let's shift gears. I'll get back into our story and our history in a minute, but let's talk Brut here for a minute. I love this wine, and I think it's so versatile. And that's one of the things I think gets underrepresented about sparkling wine. Like, what would you not drink this with? Like, for me, like I always think, like, and it says it here, is oysters. That's to me one of the sort of the go-to. I think of, if I'm thinking about some of my favorite meals in Puerto Rico, the pulpo at Bottles would be delicious, or maybe one of the ceviches or tartars at Marmalade. Those would be such delicious type pairings with this wine. But I think what people don't realize is that this is even more versatile than this. Like, you could have this with a creamy chicken dish, a creamy linguine, and our winemakers even think that you could have it with, like, maybe not a ribeye, but like a filet mignon, or like a really nice cut of steak. So does anyone else have any kind of thoughts that they think? So this wine, if you put in the comments some maybe of your favorite pairings, I'd love to hear that. So this wine is just a classic brut. It's a blend of both Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So for us, when you make the Pinot Noir, as soon as it gets to the winery, we pick at night, and we press the grapes like we were making Chardonnay, and then that's how we get like a white wine out of the Pinot Noir. And so that's why you get this beautiful color on the brut. So it's treated just like Chardonnay when it comes to the winery. It's picked at night. It's picked really cool into these small bins, comes into the winery and gets pressed. And for us, we harvest sparkling wine really early. The idea is to have that beautiful freshness and acidity. Where those still wines that you drink, if you're drinking even like a high acid Sauvignon Blanc, is still, the pH is going to be like 3.3, 3.4. This is 3.1. This is a pretty high acid type of wine that we're making. So we harvest the grapes early because it retains the acidity in the wine, and it makes the wine, the sparkling wine, so fresh. Ooh, fried food, Santiago. I think that is a great idea. And I know that when I go to Puerto Rico, I get a lot of delicious fried food. So many amazing things to eat in Puerto Rico. Now I'm feeling like I really want to come visit. So maybe I'll meet you guys in person here in the spring. If things get better with COVID, I can come out and visit and work with Suarez. I can't wait to do it. So basically what happens is grapes come in, we press them, put them down to tank and ferment them. And so Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, there's a touch of Pinot Gris in here that adds a nice little aromatic lift. They get they go down to tank, they ferment, and then we clarify them. That's really important in sparkling wine, to have a really clear base wine. And then those are all the individual base wines, and we taste all of the different individual lots, and then we make a blend. And so in this case, this wine is almost half Chardonnay and half Pinot Noir with just a touch of Pinot Gris. And then we do what's called the tirage. So basically we add more sugar to the fermentation, to the still wine, to the dry wine, and we put it in an individual bottle, and we cap it with like a beer bottle cap, and that's called tirage. And that's the key part of sparkling wine that's made in the method traditionnel, the champagne style method, is that it's done in individual bottles. So now you can imagine these bottles. Another thing that we do that I love about Domaine Carneros is that not only do we do the method traditionnel in terms of the sparkling wine being fermented with yeast in an individual bottle, but we also age all of the wine for at least 3 years, which goes above and beyond even the champagne protocols for these vintage wines. And so all of our sparkling wine has been aged in tirage for 3 years. So what happens is you add sugar to the base wine, you put the wine into this bottle that's going to be the same bottle that comes to Puerto Rico that you open years later, but it's capped with a bar cap. It does a second fermentation in the bottle, and when that happens, you gain about 1 degree of 1% of alcohol and all the beautiful bubbles. And so that's what happens during the secondary fermentation that occurs in the bottle. And then we let it sit on tirage, so on that spent yeast, for 3 years or more. And that makes the wine more like creamy and toasty and gives it so much more complex character to it. And then we go through a process that's called disgorging. So after the 3 years, first we have to riddle the wine. So now you have these dead yeasts. So the bottles have been sitting on their side. So you can imagine like the dead yeast along the bottle. of the bottom of the bottle, or the side of the bottle technically. You do the riddling, so you have to move the bottle slowly over time to a more vertical position, so the yeast all goes to, the top of the wine, but now the top of the wine is, the bottle's inverted. And then we dip that bottom or the top of the wine into an ice bath. It's called disgorging. Freeze it, pop it out. That's the disgorging. And then you do the final dosage. So that's when you add a little bit more wine. So usually from the same blend, and a tiny bit of sweetness to the wine. And that's going to play into a little bit when we talk about the Remi, the third wine that we have, which has a little bit more sweetness. Ooh. Pedro was mentioning the brioche aromas that you can really get in the brut, and that is something that does get created by that time on the yeast in the secondary fermentation. That's what gives it, to me, I love that, the brioche or the shortbread type character, the yeastiness, the toastiness, the creaminess. It turns some of the like higher acid green apple, like citrusy flavors into more like a lemon brulee, definitely more of a complex flavor palette. And I think our dedication to being so serious about the 3 years in tirage, doing the tirage in method traditionnel, meaning, in individual bottles. And so what's so cool about that is like every bottle is just like a little unique. When you get champagne that's made in method traditionnel, and people ask about Prosecco, and I know Prosecco is so popular right now. Prosecco is not made in method traditionnel, so it doesn't do the individual, it doesn't do the fermentation in each individual bottle. They get the bubbles by putting a second fermentation in tank. And so it's a little bit of a different process, and this creates a little bit more uniqueness. I mean, every year we strive to have the Domaine Carneros brut taste consistent, but we also appreciate the nuance of the vintage and the nuance of the fact that each individual bottle is its own fermentation vessel and creates something just a little unique. So I think that that's really special. So anyone have any questions for about the brut, or any other thoughts or pairings? It's such a versatile wine, but I think it's important for people to realize like this wine can pair with almost anything. And that's what's so exciting about champagne and sparkling wines is its versatility. I always like bringing it back after, like a progression where maybe you start with champagne or sparkling wine, you have lighter shrimp cocktail or crudo, oysters to start the meal. And then you go into like a still white wine, a Chardonnay, and have your next course. And then as you're progressing through the meal, maybe you have duck, or with a beautiful Domaine Carneros Pinot Noir, or a steak with a Cabernet from Napa Valley. And then going back to bubbles is always really fun, like a palate refresher, a palate cleanser. It goes great with pretty much any dessert you're going to have, or like a cheese course at the end of the meal. So the other thing that's really fun is that I forget what I was going to say because I'm looking at your guys' questions. Like to make cocktails with sparkling wine. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone, but for any sparkling wine. But this brut actually plays really well, in with like a French 75 or with a vermouth or things like that. It's you can get a little creative with or do like brunchy things with mimosas, or plays on like a peach mimosa and everything like that. So we have a question about if the method traditionnel affects the size of the bubbles, and yes, so that you could probably tell the difference that the bubbles in a Prosecco are generally a little bit bigger and coarser. And when you see like in them, look how beautiful and delicate your stream is. I don't know if you can see it on my screen, but they're just, they're just beautiful. I've got like just a little stream of tiny bubbles, and that's called the mousse. And that's the quality of the mousse is the amount of sugar you put into the fermentation is going to be how much CO2 is released during that secondary fermentation. The more you put, the more effervescent the wine is going to be. So over the years, Domaine Carneros has dialed that in to get a really delicate mousse. And again, like if you've got the sort of non-method traditional sparkling wines, generally the bubbles are a little bit coarser. Richard was asking about glass type. So I like, instead of like a more traditional, so whatever you want really is, and don't overcomplicate things. I think that that's what's, unfortunate about wine in general, is that it can be intimidating for people, and that's not ever the idea behind in a producer's mind. Obviously they want their wines to be enjoyed, appropriately, but at the same time, I think we'd rather people drink wine than not drink wine, and drink sparkling wine than not drink sparkling wine. So what I've noticed in the industry is a lot of people will actually drink sparkling wine in like a white wine glass, like just a small regular wine glass rather than a flute, because you can capture a little bit the aroma better in a like a small white wine glass versus a flute. Whereas in this case, I really like these kind of tulip shaped flutes. And I think that this is what like the champagne houses recommend. And coupe glasses, somebody had a question about coupe glasses. Those are fun and they're elegant and they like totally add to the life of the party. So I wouldn't tell you not to drink it in anything. In fact, this past weekend was pretty hot and we were by my pool, and I don't know if you guys have had the rage here, there, like we have here, of the insulated corksicle or swig, those sort of insulated cups that keep your drinks cold. So we were drinking champagne out of a corksicle. So I'm not sure how the traditionalists in Champagne would feel about it, but here, whatever occasion you want to drink and what glassware you have, just go for it. I think that's the most important, is that you're happy, you enjoy it, you don't overthink it, and you don't feel intimidated by it, because that's definitely not what we want. So the Brut. Now we're moving on to the Rosé, which is always so pretty. This is a pretty color. So I wanted to talk about women in sparkling wine making for a couple of reasons. One is that Domaine Carneros was founded in 1987 by a woman winemaker. Her name is Eileen Crane, and she's been an incredible inspiration for me and a role model for me. I've known her since the beginning of my career. I've always worked in Carneros and felt connected to this region. And so I've always known Eileen and completely respected everything that she's ever done. That's why, another reason why this was such a great job for me, my background farming grapes in Carneros, that this brand is so dedicated to this region that I love, and also that the Tattinger family and Kopp families have always been dedicated and open-minded. If you think about 1987, there weren't a lot of women winemakers at all in Napa Valley. There was maybe like 3 or 4 that you can think of. And Eileen was one of them, and she had already cultivated an expertise in sparkling wine. She was a pastry chef at Domaine Chandon. They were the first sparkling wine house in the area. And then she convinced them to let her work in the lab and learn the sparkling wine process. And then Gloria Ferrer hired her to build their facility and create their brand. And in 1986, 1987, when the Tattingers and Kopps family were looking at the property here and were investing in the property, they had put an ad out that said, we're looking for a young man outside of maybe UC Davis who has some sparkling wine experience. And it literally said young man, because that was very common back in the day to put a gender for different roles in the wine industry. And a friend of hers who was a winemaker at Sequoia Grove, which is one of our sister properties, suggested that she applied, and she met the Tattingers and they fell in love with her, and she with them, and she knew that with their experience in Champagne and her love of Champagne that it was a great fit. And so she and Claude Tattinger and now Pierre-Emmanuel Tattinger have worked to create the best sparkling wine in California, with both a nod to the traditional Champagne methods, but also recognizing California's like beautiful fruit and all the exuberance that we get in our wines from all the sunshine that we have here. So I think she's just done a fabulous job of that. Eileen is retiring, so that's why I got this job. And lucky for us, she's still staying on as consultant, so she'll be helping us make the wines. And both of our winemakers, Zach Miller, who is our sparkling winemaker, and TJ Evans is our still winemaker. We make Pinot Noirs. If you haven't had them, you should try them. Suarez brings the estate Pinot Noir into Puerto Rico, so give it a try sometimes. They both worked here since 2008, so there's going to be a lot of continuity between her consulting and their experience here working with her to continue, you know, in her legacy. And when they decided to make this rosé, she named it after another really influential woman, Madame de Pompadour, who was Louis XV's mistress in the French court. And she was a controversial character back in the day, but looking back, she's really celebrated now because she was a real patron of the arts and also brought champagne to the court of Versailles. So everyone's happy about that. So the rosé that you guys are trying is named in her honor, the Madame de Pompadour. So let me know what you guys think of the rosé when you have a second to try it. So this wine is not 100% Pinot Noir. It's 60% Pinot Noir. We can actually go back to the little slideshow, and you'll see that the blend on this is 59% Pinot Noir and 41% Chardonnay. So let's talk about how this wine gets made, because it actually is a little different. So I mentioned that with the Brut, the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay get treated the exact same. So they come to the winery, they get pressed off the skins and seeds right away so that they're clear, you know, clear wines with no pigment. When we make the rosé, so there's two different ways you can make it. And even in Champagne, some of the champagne houses will blend a tiny bit of red wine into their rosés. We don't do that. When we get some of the Pinot Noir, we bring it in and we destem it like we were going to make a still Pinot Noir. So instead of pressing the juice and extracting the skins and seeds and stems right away, which is how we make like a Blanc de Noir style, or all the Pinot Noir that went into the Brut, some of the Pinot Noir we destem it, keep the whole berry, and let it sit in a tank for about 5 to 7 days. So not the full amount that we would do if we were going to have a Pinot Noir fermentation for like a still Pinot Noir, but we still let it have some contact with the skins before we press it. So we'll drain it from the skins. It's called like a saignée or a bleed. So we'll get a little bit of a really light pigment to that wine. And when we're making the blend, so in this case, you see it's 60% Pinot and 41% Chardonnay. Of the 60% Pinot, about 20 to 25% is what we call that macerated higher pigment color. And then the rest of it is that non-pigmented, like Blanc de Noir style that goes into the Brut Cuvée. So for those of you who've had a Blanc de Noir style sparkling wine, that comes from 100% Pinot Noir and or Pinot Meunier, which is another variety. We don't grow that here at Domaine Carneros, but it's reasonably popular in Champagne as another red grape. So Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, pressed right away to make a clear, this color type Brut wine is a Blanc de Noir. If you have a Blanc de Blanc, it's generally made from 100% Chardonnay or maybe Chardonnay with a tiny bit of Pinot Gris, but most of them are mainly Chardonnay. We make a tiny bit of a Blanc de Blanc in our high-end wine. I don't know if anyone maybe knows the name of it, but that can be a little trivia question for somebody pop up if they know the name of our top cuvee, which is 100% Chardonnay, or also known as a Blanc de Blanc style. So that's a little geeky information on wine. Hopefully I'm not boring you. I find it very fascinating, and I've spent my career working with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but also Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet and Napa. And I've never really made sparkling wine before, so I'm really learning a lot about it right now. And every morning at 9:30, me, Zach, and TJ and Eileen are blending, and so we've been making all the blends, and it's been really, really a fun and amazing experience. So this is a little bit of a different kind of flavor component to it. There's a little bit more, and I don't know if it's sometimes just suggestive, but like raspberries and a little like cherry notes and a little bit more like floral note. I get more rose petal. Richard with Le Rev, yes. So our top Blanc de Blanc is called Le Rêve, which means the dream in French. And so a second question, or a second trivia question, would be, which wine is Le Rêve inspired by? So the Taittinger family makes a Blanc de Blanc that's their tête de cuvée, or their top wine. And Claude Taittinger challenged Eileen to make Le Rêve a Blanc de Blanc to match that Blanc de Blanc in its style. And he told her that Le Rêve is awesome. So thanks, Richard. That when he first tasted our Le Rêve, our Blanc de Blanc, he said, "Oh, had I known it was going to be this good, I might not have told you to make it." And it's pretty fun. I did an event recently where we had our Tête de Cuvée Le Rêve, and still trivia question for you guys is, what's Taittinger's Tête de Cuvée and theirs? And we tried them side by side, and they're different. Ours is a little, richer, it's fruitier. It's very like typical of California. Theirs has even more age on there. So like our current vintage is 2012, theirs is 2007. So has a little bit more toastiness in it as well. So just depends on what kind of style you want. This wine is super fun. It's great to have on its own. It's also, I would say, pretty versatile. Kind of the classics, if you match the color. Salmon is like a pretty classic pairing for this. Some people think like duck is really good with a Brut Rosé. I like it with berries. So a lot of times, like after dinner, if I'm wanting a lighter dessert. Karina with the Comte de Champagne. Yes, that's Taittinger's Tête de Cuvée. And yet another reason why I worked here was like, this is the best job for me, is because that's my favorite of the Tête de Cuvées of the Grand Champagne houses. I love the Comte de Champagne. It's the 100% Chardonnay. And I think Chardonnay makes, a more serious wine. This wine's so just like fun and flirty, and it just makes everybody happy. So, sushi. Yes, would be an awesome pairing. Some sushi with, Santiago said sushi with the sparkling rosé here, and I completely agree. And now maybe we'll go get sushi later. That sounds delicious. So yeah, sushi would be a great pairing with this wine. Really, I think what people, a message for people is that these wines are more versatile than anyone has ever thought, and they can go the distance across a meal better than, so many other types of wines. So any other thoughts, pairings, questions? I hope you guys like it. And you can see the mousse again. It's very, very delicate bubbles. All right. So one more wine. Let me pull up the next slide. Oops. Is the Vermeil. So Vermeil is a gilding process where silver was coated with gold. It was very popular in France in the 18th century, and that's what this wine is named after. And so this wine uses the Brut base, so that sort of same base. This is a slightly older vintage than the 2016 Brut that you guys are trying, but it's that same wine base of ours. So in 2013, our base Brut was blended with 63% Chardonnay, 32% Pinot Noir, and 5% Pinot Gris. And when we do the dosage, so I talked pretty extensively about the tirage. That's when we put sugar into the base wine in a tank and then bottle that with a little crown cap, like a beer cap, let the fermentation occur, let it age for 3 or more years. Le Rêve, which we've talked about, ages for 6 to 7 years. So 3 to 4 years. And then when we do the disgorging, so after riddling, getting the yeast to go down to the bottom of the, to the head of the bottle, freeze it, pop it off, that's the disgorgement. And then we do the dosage, which is the final addition of wine and a little bit of sweetness. And back historically, the champagne houses were using like 13 to 14 grams per liter, which would end up a sugar at like 1.3%. It's not that much, but over the years, maybe with climate change, I don't know what's caused it, but warmer vintages, riper vintages, both domestic sparkling wine and champagne have backed off on how much sugar is added in the dosage. And more likely the average right now is to get to like a 0.9%, 0.8%, maybe up to 1% of sugar in the final blend. And so that's what we were looking at with the last two wines that we tried. We do make a tiny bit of a wine here called Ultra Brut, and sometimes you might hear of a wine called Brut Natural. And that means with the dosage, it's just wine added back that's dry, and there's no sugar, there's no sweetness. And sometimes people will say that those wines, some people really like them, but they're sharper and their acid is higher. And we had a tasting recently with Elaine Chukin Brown. She's a wine writer, and she was saying that she's noticed that the dosage actually makes the wine available to you. So it opens the experience, the flavor, the palate, that sometimes, the wines that are Brut Natural can be just like a little too acidic or a little too sharp. And then that's like the overwhelming character that you get versus having a little bit more of the roundness that you get from adding the sweetness of the dosage. So this wine, the Vermeil, we actually add a little bit of Larève in the dosage. So instead of, most of our dosages are with the same wine blended back in this case, this is the Vermeil, which is the gold of the Larève, the 100% Chardonnay Blanc de Blanc, our top wine, added with a little bit of sweetness, and in this case, a little bit more sweetness. So this wine gets to 2.5% sugar versus, again, like a 1%, which is more likely to be a little bit the average amount. So if you haven't had a chance to try the Vermeil, let's take a little sip. So this is gets a little bit more like floral, like honeysuckle and white flower. Also a little bit more tropical, like lychee, maybe even some pineapple. What do you guys think? I think this would be a good pairing with like a triple cream cheese. So I was surprised that we had this in Puerto Rico because we don't actually sell much of this outside of the winery. So this is a little bit of a treat to have. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions about the process of making sparkling wine, or ooh, pancakes and frites? I think that sounds awesome. Yeah, so I mean, so versatile. This would be goes great. He's the one with all the suggestions here. A lot of different fruit, so you could really have like a simple dessert or like a mid-course that's kind of like, instead of just doing like a sorbet type thing, you can have have some Vermeil with fruit, do a palate cleanser, and go on to the next course if you're doing a multi-course meal. Or you can have it at the end of the night as like a more delicate, light dessert. But it's not too sweet. I mean, I don't read this as being too sweet. And I think that's important for us, that we don't want that to be the only impression. You want to have, the long finish, the creaminess of the wine. So I'm going to show you just a couple more pictures. And there's a little note in the chat room about how to get the wines, because Richard, you mentioned that you didn't have a bottle. So make sure that you have the opportunity to order, I think, through Friday. Yes, till Friday, you can get these at a discount, 20% off. Let me show you guys a few other photos so that when you come here, you know what to expect. And I hope that you do. I'll type my email in here too. I think I can do that. Or maybe hold on. I'm not sure why. Joe Marie, I'm going to put my email on there. If you can add it, if it doesn't show up, that would be really helpful. If you guys have any questions or you're coming to visit, we'd love to see you here. Showed you guys our vineyards. There's just some beautiful shots of our estate vineyards, our historic barn, Chardonnay, more Chardonnay, picking Chardonnay. So you can see it's got that golden color. That means it's pretty close to being ready. That's the night picking, and that's really important with sparkling wine because the sparkling wine, Karina's having the Cuvée de la Pompadour right now. And Santiago wants to know when's the best time to visit. I think anytime, because even in the winter when it might be cold or rainy, then you've got like the fireplace kind of cozy vibe. Everybody recommends like August, September when we're gearing up for harvest. But that's a busier time in the valley, so it's kind of a little harder to get reservations and things like that. But really any time of the year. The spring is beautiful when the vines just start growing. So it just depends on what you like. But there's the nighttime machine harvesting. So we've got these beams of light so we can pick through the night, and that way the grapes come cold, and so we can press them, because what you don't want in sparkling wine is a lot of the phenolic character. Like, when you drink a Cabernet and you want that like rich tannin, the big red wine, you don't want that in sparkling wine. You want the most delicate flavors, because all the richness gets added and layered onto the wine with the secondary fermentation and the aging process. So we pick at night so that when we press the grapes, we're not getting a lot of the character of the skins, and we're getting that kind of pure fruit expression. So you can see the guys again picking at night. It's a pretty fun thing to see. And then when you do come, we've got all these different flights, cheese pairings, caviar. We didn't mention caviar, but that's a classic pairing. Lobster is a classic pairing. When you come here, we've got a salmon plate, cheese plates, charcuterie plates. Every morning we do, if you sign up in advance, an Asian bites pairing. So some creative things. We mentioned tartare, scallop ceviche. So there's some fun little pairings that go with the different wines. This is what we call our jardin, our winter garden, Jardin d'Hiver. And that's a newer addition to the chateau that we built in 2018. And we do tastings in there even in the winter, because we wanted to bring that sort of like indoor-outdoor space to the chateau. And I think it was just such a lovely addition. There's another view of it. And there's our lagoon. So one of the things that's really important at Domaine Carneros too is our sustainability program. So all our water comes from our site. We use wells, and then we recycle all of the water that's used in the winemaking process and reuse it as vineyard and landscaping irrigation. We built the first solar array of any winery in 2003, and we are rebuilding a new solar array this coming year. And so we're going to be adding to our solar array a lot of different sustainability initiatives. We recycle our cork, we recycle our packaging. We're certified Napa Green and Napa Land. And for those of you who it's important to know that it's important to us to treat the land with respect and treat our people with respect. And that's why we have all these estate vineyards and a full-time vineyard crew who farms them. And so anyway, I do hope you guys come visit. My email is up there, so write it down so that when you come visit, I'd love for you guys to reach out to me and let me know, and hopefully I'll be around and can come say hello if I'm not in Puerto Rico. Going to Ropa Vieja Grill, that's another favorite. I love so many of the restaurants there, and I love the people. So I can't wait to go back and check it out. I feel like it's been too long. So any final thoughts or questions or? All right. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Please reach out if you have any questions, and hope you all have a great rest of your evening. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Bye.